Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Planet Coaster, and today we are back in the Paris-inspired park after taking a brief hiatus for episode 1 of Jubilee Gardens, which episode 2 of that collaboration is up on CommandoSanta's YouTube page. I will include a link in the description below for that. He does a great job of kicking off the main street for that project. So to give you guys kind of an overview of upload frequency, you can expect videos every 2 weeks on my channel. Sometimes it's a little bit delayed, but about every 2 weeks. And so basically from here on out, it'll be an episode of this, the Paris Park, and then an episode of Jubilee Gardens, and then, just continue that until either my computer breaks or I'm done with one of them. So, yeah, I think I always start these things in the daytime, so I thought I'd kick it off at night, just because I really, really like how this is turning out. It's feeling like a full-fledged park, at least one that's insanely expensive to build and over the top, but nevertheless, it's starting to feel like a park, I think, especially when you kind of get into the coaster station here, some of the scenery. So let me get out of the tagged cam there. Yeah, so really liking how this all came together. This was a struggle, I'll be honest though. Spent a lot of time on this building and on the layout of the coaster itself. I think in the last video, the coaster layout kind of went, it was less of a turn here and went off in this direction. And I just needed to make it more compact, and so yeah, there was a lot of frustration, honestly, in trying to get this thing to look right. But really happy with how it's coming together. I'm really pleased with the coaster station. It's inspired by the Grand Palace in Paris. It's not supposed to be an exact recreation. If I made it exact, or at least to scale of Musée Orsay over here, it would be about twice the size of this building. So from that standpoint, I just wanted to take, some of the cues from it and make the station inspired by it. And I think I mentioned in the last episode that I really wanted to keep this open air, or give the appearance that there was glass in this ceiling here, for a couple reasons. One, I just think it looks nice, and then two, when you're, get that beam out of the way, when you're like waiting for the coaster, inside the station, you get an awesome view of the Eiffel Tower, as well as just the kind of scenery around you. So yeah, that was the inspiration. The time lapse at the end of this does have the full build of the coaster station. I do not have all of this hedge work. Let me switch back to daytime here. I don't have all of this hedge work in here, unfortunately. Again, it was a lot of trial and error as well, and that's really hard to record sometimes when you're in that mode where, it doesn't feel like anything is working. And but yeah, so here's an idea of what I did though. I basically just used, get this, I need a new mouse. I basically use that same dome technique, so you have a beam like that in the center here, and you just copy things around, and then I use these three pieces pretty much to make the whole area. So you copy this, and you get the idea. You copy that around enough times and you get those, and then like this piece here is this larger circle, and then the smaller circle here. So I did a lot of photo research on these types of gardens, and I'm really happy with how it turned out. So what basically, I will continue over this design to the other side. I really wanted to get it done before this episode, but I just didn't have the time to with the holidays. So this will continue over on this side into this area here, and then let's see. This area, I still have a lot of work to do as well. I'm going to do a fountain in here, I think. Some more of those hedges probably in this area. And then this cattle pen is going to have a cover as well. I'm still I have an idea of what I want it to look like. You can see I'm carrying over some of the similar design features I used in the queue area on that flat ride. So yeah, but I really like how this is shaping up, this path layout. I think this helix being right here looks really cool with the water, and I'll definitely have some railings and some walls that go down into here, and then it'll sort of transition on this bridge area into more natural landscaping. So there'll be stones and bushes and rocks and things like that, and definitely more trees as well. So yeah, a lot of trial and error on this as well. The next episode will likely be more shops and restaurants and stuff here. I'm going to, instead of doing more of like the main street, I'm going to go for a look of gosh, I'm spacing on the area. Montmartre, I think is how you pronounce it. But it's an area of Paris. It's an older area that wasn't necessarily impacted as much by the Haussmann renovation of Paris, and so it's got some smaller buildings that aren't quite so big. It's got more of like a French country feel to it, and so I'm going to implement those in this area here just to kind of give this a nice plaza feel, as well as have some shops and restrooms and stuff for the guests. And yeah, so I wanted to preserve, kind of a larger plaza area here with the ride. And then I'm not sure what I'll do with this area over here, but yeah, we'll see. So anyway, like I said, full time lapse of this will be after this real time segment. I'm trying to think if there's anything else. Yeah, I still need to kind of flesh out this queue area as well. I'm not completely happy with that. And one major thing, I decided to go with the smaller art shapes for the custom supports for a couple reasons. So one, if you look at the in-game supports, let me find a good example. Yeah, so the in-game supports here are much smaller, and I didn't want to have to custom support the entire thing, just some of the major elements. So like these loops and like some of the other inverted pieces I wanted to custom support. But yeah, so in order to use some of the in-game supports along with the custom supports, I'm going to go with the smaller art shapes. So that'll be a tedious process of redoing those, but I already did it with this one up here, and I do think it looks a lot better relative to the in-game supports. So I'll be doing that, and again, trying to kind of rework this queue area. I want to preserve this bridge so that the guests have to use that as a part of the queue. So that's kind of where I'm struggling though at this point. But I'll work on figuring that out. And then at some point I'll have an entire video of just a fireworks show, set the music, but I've been working on that, and I created these sort of firework pits that are designed to hide the fireworks from the guests. I did some research and looking at how Disney does this, and they actually have like an entire area at the back of the park that they use to launch the fireworks from. And, based on perspective, it looks as the height that they launch the fireworks to, it looks really good relative to the Disney castle. For me, I tried doing that. I tried putting them all the way back, but what ended up happening was you got fireworks like around this area, and I really want them to be up, at least in line or above the Eiffel Tower. And so this is about as far back as I could go with at least sinking them down and to try to hide them a little bit. So that's something that I'll continue to kind of work at. I don't think that's something that I'll really record just because it'll be kind of some tedious work, but tried to make it somewhat realistic, have a little electrical box with cables that would lead to these being triggered. And then I'm planning on putting in one of these buildings here, like in the office backstage area. I'll have a little control room with, monitors and stuff that would be used to trigger, theoretically they would be watching the show from there and, making sure that it's going off without a hitch. So, I think that's about it for the episode, or at least for the real-time segment, I mean. So yeah, stay tuned if you like watching the time-lapse for the overview of this building. And I'm going to go back to nighttime just because I think it looks so good. Yeah, so anyway, like I said, if you don't stick around for the time-lapse, thanks so much for tuning into the episode. If you do, we'll have a complete build of this here, and I'll kind of go into some more detail about how I did it, and kind of the struggles that I faced in making it become a reality. So anyway, thanks guys for watching. Like I said, if you're signing off here, we'll see you in the next episode. If not, I will see you on the other side of this break. And welcome into the time-lapse. Like I mentioned, it's just going to be of the coaster station here, and I started out by just kind of outlining the width of the station that I wanted, and then from there going in and using that as a reference point for the start of this dome here. So a little bit different than what I've done before, where I had to kind of plan for the fact that I wanted it to have the appearance of glass, or a glass opening. And so a little bit different than anything I've done so far, for at least for me building, and you kind of have to plan a little bit differently, and you have to kind of, you know, finagle the pieces a little bit differently than you would if you had the ability to hide things. So it's a little bit more difficult to build this way, but I'm really happy with how it turned out. I love the fact that you can look up and see the Eiffel Tower when you're inside the coaster station, and just in general, you know, gives it a nice open feeling. So I wanted to start with the sort of main tower that comes off of the dome itself, and it's one of the reasons that I was, you know, attracted to the building in the first place and wanted to use it, because, you know, I hope I did it justice, but the one in real life looks absolutely beautiful. It's just really ornate, and so using art shapes as well as some wooden pieces, I think I was able to kind of get the general look of it. And right there you can see I'm just using one of the round pieces. So if you see, like, what I did was I just put them off center a little bit, and if you copy it around enough times, it actually creates a larger circle. So anytime you're kind of making a detail like that, if you just plan on any little bit that you move from the center pivot, that's going to be the finished look all the way around when you copy it. And so I wanted to capture some of that detail, because the art shapes in the game, although they're incredibly versatile, I wish that there was a way to just scale them, similar to how, you know, you can scale certain pieces on, like, the coaster builder. It would be nice to be able to do that with the art shapes, because while there is a lot of variety, it almost feels like there's like a couple of pieces missing in between each size. So for example, if you have like the small cylinder, for example, and you go up to the medium cylinder, there almost needs to be something in between those two for a lot of the purposes that I've seen people use them for, like custom supports for one. So if let's just say you use the large cylinder as sort of a cement base for a custom support, and then you were going to make the supports themselves out of the medium cylinder. Well, in order to give the appearance that there's like some sort of metal connection, you know, adhering to the cement base, you need to use that technique that I just did, where you take a smaller piece and move it out from center and copy it around and kind of create a faux circle. So you end up using a lot more pieces than if there was just something sort of in between, or if at the very least you could scale the pieces. So I'm hoping that something like that will happen in the future. You know, I know that there's been a lot of talk about mods in the game as well, and on one hand I get it, because, you know, the care and time that Frontier put in this game and the amount of detail is incredible. The pieces themselves are amazing, and I don't think there's probably many modders that could duplicate that type of quality. But where I do think modding would come into play is that if someone could easily make a mod that allowed you to scale the art pieces like that, and it would be the same quality. You know, I know I've talked about trees before, but just little things like that, little gameplay features, I think is where modding would really help this game out a lot. Not necessarily in terms of content creation, but in terms of game improvements. I think that would help a lot. I mean, I would imagine that if modding was available, the advanced move tool would probably already have several fixes or improvements as well, and not to any fault of Frontier. I mean, they only have so much time and money. They have to decide where they allocate those resources to, but you know, if a modder, if that was like something that was in their wheelhouse, they would have no problem fixing, I don't think. So we'll see what ends up happening there. I know that the next round of updates will probably see our first set of DLC, so that'll be interesting to see kind of the tone that is set there. But anyway, enough rambling there, back into the build. So I'm just kind of fleshing out the rest of this dome segment, and then I'll use that same technique that I've used on the main street to copy it around to the other sides. So this part at this point wasn't too difficult. You'll see in a minute where I create the sort of domed features that jut out from the central dome is where it started to get a little bit difficult, especially where you connect them together. And then that, along with how the base of the coaster station was, created some headaches and ended up causing a lot of time and effort spent on this, more so than I wanted to, which is why, you know, this time lapse isn't going to have like the building for the transfer track and stuff like that. So, which, as you can tell here, this is a different layout than what you see in the real-time segment in the final format. And I did that because, like, this layout's good from the standpoint of like the coaster itself, but I changed it because I really wanted your first view as you're kind of walking across that bridge into that plaza, as you're rounding the bend around that Charoplane ride or whatever it's called. I wanted it to be of the coaster station, and so I had to tweak it a little bit to make that happen. And you know, it definitely was a trade-off. I mean, because I like the way that it's laid out here, I just didn't like the view of the coaster station as you were walking into that plaza. So, but at the same time, I also wanted to preserve where the lift hill was at, because I do like the way that the coaster interacts with the pathway that leads to this plaza, and also that sort of pond that I've created as well. And then as you're going up the lift hill, once I'm all done with this whole area, I'll put out a POV of the coaster. But I really like the way that when you go up the lift hill, you get a view of not only the Eiffel Tower, but down on the main street and on the river. And so it was definitely a trade-off. It was a lot of give and take. But I'm ultimately, I wouldn't say I'm 100% happy with the finished product in terms of where the sort of transfer track is and everything. But in terms of give and take, and in terms of prioritizing different things, I'm happy with how it turned out from that standpoint. What you just saw there was me sort of copying around the pieces that I used to transition from these arches into that central dome. And that was really difficult because it's a really weird angle, and yeah, there was a lot of trial and error on that one, just trying to get it to look right, because it's not the same angle as the arches themselves, and it's not the same angle as the dome, but in order to make it look like it connects naturally, which I'm happy with how it turned out. Like, this is a good shot of it here. Like, especially on the interior, it looks like it's a natural connection, like that it's architecturally sound. It's, you know, has sound engineering behind it. So and then this was sort of the time where I kind of broke through a creative block here and decided to make these sort of rounded edges on the building, because prior to this I was trying to make it one big square, and it just didn't look good with the roof on top. So I kind of figured out doing it this way, and was happy with how it looked. So you'll see the sides, I'm still not sure about what I'm doing there, and here you can see me changing the coaster layout a bit, where now the station faces that plaza, and that's really what I wanted to. Ultimately, that was more important to me than either redoing the entire coaster or making the transfer track and the storage building, you know, completely seamless into the whole project. So like I said, some give and take, but I'd like your feedback there. Maybe you have some ideas that I didn't think of how I could improve that part of it. So one thing that I did use, right here, so you'll see I used that same, I tried to do it by hand, and then my OCD got the better of me and I wanted it to be perfectly symmetrical. So I figured out the central point of that circle and then use that dome technique to copy it around, and it flows perfectly with that curvature of that grid piece. And I just ended up using that for basically all of the detail on this area of it, and then copy it around to the other sides. So here you can see the same technique And then once I had that, the curvature done, the straight part's easy, but you can copy around the curvature to the other side, and not the whole thing because it's a different dimension, but yeah, that worked out really well. And then basically I carried similar design features down to each sort of tier of the building. So I cover the bottom part there, and then all I did was I rotated those pieces the other way, upside down, I guess, and then moved them to cover the bottom part of that opening as well. And I'm happy with how that turned out. That's an example of repeating design features, but just tweaking them slightly, and it gives a totally different look to whatever you're working on. I would have loved to right here been able to use that castle wall detail, but it just would have created too many things sticking out of the building. And since I had kind of an open air interior, I wanted to minimize that as much as possible. But yeah, you can see I just turned that piece upside down and used it to finish off that detail, and I think it looks really nice. And here I cut out a lot of the footage, but I tried to create kind of like custom urns or vase. Like the real building in real life has these really ornate, they almost look like planters, but they don't have any plants in them. But I tried to create those using some of the art shapes, and it just wasn't coming together. So I ended up defaulting to the Christmas ornaments, just because they themselves look ornate, and you know, it's less pieces, it's a little bit easier to do, and I still think it looks really good. So one thing too that I kept going back and forth on was the pillars themselves there. I kept going back and forth between the square and the round columns, and I ended up deciding on the round ones just because I think it looked a little bit nicer, and I know I've used the square ones quite a bit in other buildings, so just to add some more variety overall, I ended up going with the round ones, and then they're just copying around the station to the other side. At this point, I knew I had something that I really liked, and from here it was just figuring out how to kind of finish it off and make it look like a legitimate building, not just something that I don't know, something that didn't make any sense realistically. So instead of doing those, I ended up doing these smaller arches, which I'm happy with. It creates a nice look on the front facade that faces that plaza. In real life, it has a similar type look, but there's windows that are kind of inside of those arches, and so I thought to mimic that was a good idea, but leave it open instead. And then in terms of the detail at the top here, I used that like stucco detail. I can't remember the exact name of the piece, but it's called like, it's under the stucco, I know that, but it's got like the ornate like rose designs on it. I use those to add additional detail to the front here, which you'll see in a minute. I just wish that there was like a round version of that, because I wasn't able to carry that design feature over to the corners of the building, which would have been nice to do, but I'm sure I could try to use that same technique that I use for the other pieces, but I think because they're so long that they wouldn't look good. So that's one suggestion, actually, if anyone from Frontier is watching, is I would love if a lot of the 4 meter long pieces and 2 meter long pieces, if we just had a 1 meter long option of a lot of those pieces, it would open up a lot more flexibility to the game. And that's probably another example of where modding would actually improve the game, because if you have a modder taking existing assets in the game and just tweaking the size and shape of them, I mean, I don't know a lot about game design or anything like that, so maybe I'm talking out of my ass, but I would think that if you're just tweaking already existing objects in the game and changing the size or the length in this example, that wouldn't be too difficult, and the end result would still look really good. So that's something that I hope to see in the future. Yeah, so here's that piece I'm talking about. And yeah, like if I had a 1 meter option of that, if I had a 1 meter piece, I could easily use that same technique and copy it around in a circle. So we'll see. Again, if you know more about that stuff than I do, I'd love to see your comments below. Just because I don't know a ton about it, but theoretically that makes sense to me, and it doesn't seem like it would be all that difficult to accomplish. So, because like I said, I get where Frontier's concerns are in terms of people creating original content, and that diluting the quality, because you even see that in games like City Skylines, where not all modders are created equal. There's some people that produce amazing content that looks like it was a part of the stock game, and then there's stuff that you can tell it creates some purpose and fills some purpose, but it's not. The quality just isn't as good, and you can tell by the pride that is put into this game or the quality that's put into this game, that Frontier takes a lot of pride in that, and so I understand the hesitation from that standpoint. But yeah, that would be something that would be nice to have in addition to some of the pieces that we already see in the game, and even the grid pieces. Like, I know we now have 2 by 4 meter pieces with the billboards, but that's not. I would love that if we had that with like wall pieces and things like that as well. So yeah, and speaking of the billboards and things like that, I haven't really figured out how I'm gonna implement some of that stuff. I really want to get into it, but I'm not that great with Photoshop and with any sort of movie maker or anything like that either. So I'm not sure how, but I do want to implement some of that stuff. I know that for like the fireworks room that I talked about, the kind of control room for the fireworks, I'm going to use the small monitors and just take like screenshots of the fireworks themselves and put those on the monitors. Just because I don't want to destroy frame rate with like actual video, but I think a couple pictures on some monitors would look cool. And then, just like adding them to queues and stuff, I guess. But videos, apart from the in-game stuff that they've already created for us, and some of the stuff that I've seen people do on Reddit, I don't really know kind of what I want to do with those yet. So if you have any suggestions or any ideas, I'd love to hear them. Some of you guys are much more creative than I am when it comes to that stuff. Like, I'm just blown away by some of the things I've seen. Like, I'm not sure if they have a YouTube page. I don't think so, but I saw something on Reddit where someone made, I think their park is called Lakewood Gardens maybe, and they created this huge billboard. Or no, I saw it on Twitter. They created this huge billboard with multiple screens, and it's all seamless video across multiple screens. It's amazing. So things like that, I'm just blown away by people's ability and creativity. But so anyway, here in the video, I had to get a little bit creative in covering up those rounded corners. So I just used those castle detail. Those pieces are really versatile, especially if you want to hide gaps in plazas. If you're using that black stone, you can color those pieces black and sink them into the ground and hide some of that detail or some of that exposed grass. So that's what I used for the bottom there. I was going to use it up top here as well, but the problem was inside of the station, it created, you can see there briefly that it created a lot of pieces sticking through. And so I ended up just using the flat stucco accent piece that doesn't have any detail on it to cover those up. So the color was a little bit tough to match and it didn't turn out exact, but since it's from the air, I wasn't as concerned about it as some of the pieces down below that are more visible to like the guests. And so then I just copy it around to the other side, and some of the other work I do off screen here, like all the landscaping and things like that. But hopefully in the next episode, I'll have all that finished for you. And then, like I said, we'll start working on the plaza buildings that are inspired by Montmartre. I think that's how you pronounce it. So sorry, French friends, if that's incorrect. But yeah, that's what I'll be working on in the next episode. But in a couple weeks, we'll actually be in another episode of Jubilee Gardens. So thank you guys so much for watching. I'm about out of time lapse here, but I really appreciate it, and we'll see you in the next episode.